I never thought I'd be standing behind a counter in a dusty little bookstore, pretending to know the difference between first editions and dog-eared paperbacks, just because he asked me to keep an eye on her. My best friend, her husband, had that look in his eyes, the one that says he trusts you with something fragile. And I'd promised. The door jingled, letting in the kind of late afternoon light that makes the dust motes look like tiny floating stars. That's when I saw her. Emma. She didn't rush. She moved like she owned the quiet, like she'd been here 1,000 times before, though I knew she hadn't. Mid-40s, but not in a way that tried to show age or hide it. She was just present. There was a calmness to her, like she'd survived things I couldn't even imagine. I cleared my throat because naturally, my brain decided now was the perfect time to betray me. "Hi," I said, too casual, too loud. She looked up from the stack of travel guides she'd been thumbing through and gave me a half-smile. Not polite, not dismissive, just acknowledging. She tilted her head slightly, like she was deciding whether I was worth the attention. And in that tilt, in that slight raise of an eyebrow, I felt my chest tighten. "I wasn't expecting anyone," she said softly, almost to herself. My friend asked me to check in on you." I stammered, instantly hating how it sounded. Too mechanical, too rehearsed. Her gaze lingered, long enough that I could feel my own fingers tensing around the edge of the counter. She didn't say anything else, just watched me quiet, steady, like she was seeing me in a way that made the air a little too heavy. I wanted to look away, but I didn't. Part of me didn't want to. She turned a page slowly, almost deliberately, and then she offered me a cup of coffee from the small, overworked machine behind her. The gesture was so simple, so mundane, that I almost missed it, but I didn't. My hand brushed hers when I took it, just for a second too long. Her skin was warm. My pulse shot up. We stood there, sipping, neither speaking. The shop's clock ticked somewhere behind us, but it felt slower, like it was giving us time we weren't supposed to have. I could see her glance at a window and then back at me, and there was a subtle question in her eyes, though I couldn't have named it if my life depended on it. And just like that, the world outside seemed farther away. The quiet hum of the old fluorescent lights, the soft scent of paper and coffee, even the dusty sunlight on the worn hardwood floors. It all felt like it had been set up for this small electric moment. I don't know if she realized it, or if she was aware of the way I couldn't stop noticing her, the way my hand lingered a fraction too long on the counter, the way I kept my voice too steady, the way I felt an almost painful awareness of her proximity. That night, I kept replaying her voice in my head, like I missed something, or maybe wanted something. The next time I saw her, it was raining. Not the soft kind of rain that feels poetic. More the persistent, gray drizzle that soaks the sidewalks and leaves everything damp and heavy. She was at the repair shop, where I'd come to pick up a book I'd forgotten last week. Or maybe I had just been looking for an excuse to see her again. She was leaning over a small counter, examining a stack of invoices, her hair pulled back loosely, strands falling onto her forehead. She didn't notice me at first. I watched her, the way her fingers traced the edge of the papers, the faint line of tension across her jaw. She was focused, meticulous. And yet, there was a tiredness there that no coffee or smile could hide. "Hey," I said softly, not wanting to startle her. She looked up, blinked, and gave that same half-smile. Reserved, careful. She didn't move closer, didn't step away. She just let me be there. "Could use a hand?" I asked, gesturing at the papers she was juggling. She hesitated, the briefest pause that made my chest tighten. Then, almost reluctantly, she pushed a few sheets toward me. "If you don't mind," she said, voice low, carrying a quiet fatigue that I couldn't stop noticing. As we sorted through the invoices, I caught myself looking at her hands. Strong but elegant, with faint lines that told stories I wasn't meant to know. She laughed softly at something on one of the pages, a little startled sound that made me pause. It wasn't the laugh of someone entirely at ease. It was careful, almost self-conscious, as if she feared revealing too much. "You're really good at this," I said, trying to make conversation, though I wasn't sure why. Her eyes flicked up, and for a moment they softened just a fraction. "It's not hard," she replied, her voice slightly hesitant, like she wanted to stop short of meaning anything deeper. Then she shook her head lightly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. The room smelled faintly of wet coats and the tang of metal from the repair shop. Outside, rain drummed on the windows, a dull percussion that seemed to underscore the awkward quiet between us. I wanted to say something, anything, but I didn't. I was too aware of the way she shifted on her feet, the slight slump in her shoulders, the careful way she avoided meeting my gaze for longer than a heartbeat. Finally, she paused, straightening and tucking the papers into a neat pile. Her hands lingered on the counter, brushing against mine by accident, or maybe not. Couldn't tell. I wanted to ask if she was tired, if she needed to sit, but the words got stuck somewhere between my chest and my throat. Instead, she looked at me, not quite pleading, not quite inviting, but with a look that held something unspoken, something urgent and fragile. She looked at me like she wanted to say something, but didn't, and that silence felt louder than words. This keeps the slow burn tension, emotional asymmetry, and subtle physical cues intact, while hinting at growing vulnerability. It was late, almost too late for either of us to be there. The repair shop had emptied hours ago, and the rain outside had turned from drizzle into a steady, drumming downpour. We were going through some old manuals, trying to figure out a wiring issue for a project she'd promised to fix herself but couldn't manage alone. I could hear her sigh from across the counter. Not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet release of tension. I wanted to ask why, but my voice felt heavy, almost wrong in the stillness. "You've done this before?" I said softly, pretending to examine a page. "Right?" She looked up, eyes flickering. For a split second, she seemed about to answer, but then her phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at it quickly, her face tightening. "It's nothing," she murmured, but I caught the way her fingers hesitated over the screen. I stepped closer to hand her a tool she had dropped. Our hands brushed. I froze. She didn't pull away immediately, though her eyes darted down, away from mine, and a tiny tremble passed through her fingers. That small contact, so casual, so brief, felt like a jolt. "You shouldn't be helping me so much," she said quietly, almost to herself. "I can manage." But her voice cracked, just slightly, betraying the weariness I'd been seeing all along. I wanted to tell her it was okay to rely on someone else. I wanted to tell her she didn't have to carry everything herself. But the words wouldn't come out, they felt too intimate, too dangerous. The storm outside pressed against the windows, the sound making the room feel smaller, closer. I noticed the way her shoulders curved inward, the faint furrow of concentration in her brow, the quiet tension in her jaw. She was beautiful, and I knew that thinking it was dangerous. She bent down to grab a tool from the floor. My hand moved before I could stop it, hovering just above hers, as if instinct alone had decided to reach out. A part of me imagined her looking at me and leaning in, letting that distance collapse for just a second. But then she straightened, eyes locking on mine for a fraction of a second longer than comfort allowed. "You should go now," she said softly, a tremor in her voice I couldn't ignore. My hand was halfway to hers when she said it. And I did. But only my body left that room. I walked to the door, feeling the weight of what almost happened pressed down on my chest. Every step felt deliberate, as if my legs were trying to convince my brain I'd done the right thing. But my mind refused to let go. That small space between us had been charged, electric, and every moment before her words lingered like smoke I couldn't shake. Outside, the rain soaked through my jacket, but I barely noticed. I was still inside that room, still frozen at the counter, still wanting to close the distance and break the rules she had set. We ended up in the quiet corner of a coffee shop neither of us had intended to visit. The rain had finally let up, leaving the sidewalks slick and reflective. The kind of city glow that makes everything feel smaller, more intimate. We didn't order much, 2 half-drunk lattes, the foam already settling into dull shapes. For a long time, we just sat there, letting the silence stretch between us. She fiddled with her spoon, twisting it absent-mindedly, while I stared at the condensation creeping down my cup. Every glance at her felt heavy, loaded with things neither of us could or wanted to say. Finally, she broke it, quiet, almost uncertain. "Do you ever wonder what we're doing?" I blinked. The question hung in the air, fragile, sharp. I wanted to laugh it off, make a joke, but even joking felt impossible. All the time, I admitted, my voice low, careful. She didn't look at me, just traced a circle on the table with her fingertip. "I mean this," she said, barely audible. "You, me, this whatever it is. It's wrong, isn't it?" I hesitated, weighing my words, my heart pounding in a way I couldn't control. "I don't know," I said finally. "Wrong? Maybe. Dangerous? Yeah. But I can't. I don't know how to stop noticing you." She looked up then, and for a second, everything seemed to pause. Her eyes were wet, but not from the rain outside. They held a complexity I wasn't sure I could ever untangle. Strength and fragility at once. Caution, fear, and something else I didn't dare name. She shifted in her seat, folding her hands together like she was trying to contain something that might spill out. "I can't," she whispered. "I can't let this go anywhere. I shouldn't. I'm not. Her voice trailed off, and I realized she wasn't finishing the sentence because the truth hurt too much, or maybe because she already knew the answer. We sat like that for what felt like hours. I wanted to reach for her hand, to say it was okay, to tell her she didn't have to be perfect, that I didn't expect her to be. But my hand stayed on my lap, rigid with restraint, and I watched her with a kind of aching clarity I had never felt before. The world around us blurred, the low murmur of other patrons, the clatter of cups and spoons, but in that corner, time slowed until it felt sacred. Every breath she took, every small movement was amplified. I wanted to memorize the curve of her smile when it appeared, the way her brow furrowed when she concentrated, the way her presence made my chest tighten. And yet, there was no invitation, no promise, only a shared recognition that this us was already fragile, dangerous, and too significant to ignore. She didn't say anything, just looked at me, like she was already mourning something we never even had. I hadn't planned on going by her apartment that evening, but something tugged at me. A mixture of curiosity, worry, and the pull I couldn't name. She opened the door before I even knocked properly, the hallway dimly lit, the air carrying faint traces of lavender and old books. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. "You okay?" She hesitated in the doorway, then nodded. "Yeah, just tired." Her voice held a weight I hadn't noticed before, a kind of quiet that made me lean against the frame without realizing it. Inside, she motioned for me to sit. The apartment was cozy, cluttered in that lived-in way that somehow made me feel like I was seeing a side of her no one else did. On the coffee table was a small photo frame, face down. I reached for it and she stiffened. "Don't," she started, then paused. Her lips pressed together, and her eyes flicked to mine, torn. I set it back gently. "I didn't mean. I lost him a long time ago," she said finally, her voice low, almost trembling. "Not just, gone, but completely. My husband. Before you, before everything." I swallowed, unsure of what to say. I hadn't expected this. I only knew the faint shadows in her eyes were heavier than the surface allowed. "I keep thinking I shouldn't talk about it," she continued, fiddling with the edge of a blanket. "It's over. I survived. But sometimes..." Her voice broke, a fleeting crack that made me want to reach for her, even though I knew better. Sometimes I feel like I'm still waiting for him. I hesitated, caught between wanting to comfort her and respecting her space. I can't imagine, I said softly. But you don't have to carry it alone. Not now. She looked at me, really looked, and for the first time her guardedness faltered. There was recognition there. Not of me exactly, but of someone who might understand the quiet ache she had hidden for years. Then, she picked up the photo frame and turned it toward me. Inside was a picture of her and a man. Older, smiling, arms wrapped tight around each other. The edges of the photo were slightly worn. "He promised me he'd look after me," she said, voice barely above a whisper. And then he didn't. I felt the room tilt slightly, the weight of her words sinking into my chest. It wasn't a confession for sympathy. It was trust, a crack in the walls she'd built. We sat in silence, the kind that isn't empty. It hums, stretches, and reshapes the space between two people. My hand itched to reach for hers, but I stayed still, letting her take the lead. She took a breath like she hadn't allowed herself to in years. And for the first time, she looked at me without fear. The night felt different before it even began. She'd invited me in without hesitation this time. No guarded glance, no lingering pause at the doorway. The apartment was dim, just a single lamp casting a warm glow over the room. Outside, the city hummed, but here, it was quiet, almost protective. We didn't rush into conversation. She handed me a mug of tea and sat down beside me on the couch, close enough that I could feel the faint warmth of her shoulder through my sleeve. The silence wasn't heavy now, it felt deliberate, chosen. After a long pause, she exhaled softly. "I don't know what this is," she said, her eyes fixed on the steam rising from her cup. "And I don't know if I'm strong enough to find out." I let her words settle before answering. "Maybe we don't have to name it," I said quietly. "Maybe it's enough that it's here." She glanced at me then, a faint furrow in her brow as though weighing the cost of believing that. Her lips parted, closed again, and she leaned back, her posture finally softening. "I've spent so long keeping people at a distance," she murmured. "Even the ones I loved, especially them. Because when you let someone in," she trailed off, shaking her head. "They can leave," I finished for her. Her eyes found mine, steady and raw. Exactly. The room seemed to breathe with us, the clock ticking somewhere in the background, but neither of us moved to fill the space. My chest tightened, not with fear this time, but with something gentler, like recognition. Without really deciding to, I placed my hand on the couch between us, palm up, open. I didn't look at her. I didn't need to. After a moment that felt suspended in air, her fingers slid into mine. Not tightly, not in a rush, just enough. Enough to say what words couldn't. Her hand was cool, trembling slightly, but she didn't pull away. We sat like that, our hands resting together in the quiet, our shoulders brushing as the silence wrapped around us. I wanted to speak, to confess everything that had been building inside me, but I didn't. There was no need. She shifted, leaning her forehead lightly against my shoulder. My breath caught, but I didn't move. I let her rest there, fragile and strong all at once, and for the first time, it didn't feel like she was keeping me at arm's length. She didn't say she loved me, but she let her guard down, and that was louder than any "I love you" ever could be. I still think about that night, the one where everything quietly shifted without a single grand gesture. I remember the weight of her hand in mine, the soft brush of her shoulder against mine, and the way silence could carry so much meaning. Time has a funny way of stretching and compressing. Some days it feels like we've always existed in that space, that fragile bubble we somehow built together. Other days, I can still feel the memory of her hesitation, her careful walls, and it reminds me how rare it is to meet someone who allows you in, really in, without expecting you to fix anything. She's changed too, in ways small but profound. She smiles differently, lets herself linger in moments rather than pushing them away. I catch the way she pauses before shutting a door, as if reconsidering whether to protect herself or step closer to what feels alive. And I know I've grown too, more patient, more aware of the tiny, weightless moments that make connection possible. We never forced a label on what happened. There was no dramatic confession, no sudden, sweeping "this is us." We simply allowed our presence to settle together, letting the slow warmth of care and understanding fill the cracks we'd carried alone for years. I've learned that love isn't always loud. It doesn't always demand proof or declaration. Sometimes it's the gentle gravity that keeps you tethered to someone else's heartbeat without you even realizing it. It's the hand you take without thinking, the shared laughter over something small, the quiet certainty that, in this messy, unpredictable life, someone sees you and stays. And maybe that's the most extraordinary part, that it isn't perfect. It's messy, cautious, uncertain, and completely human. The way she looks at me now, the way I watch her, the way our silences fit together like mismatched puzzle pieces. It's enough. It's more than enough. Every so often, I catch her glancing my way, and I can see the memory of fear, loss, and hesitation lingering, but it's softened now. It's no longer a barrier. It's part of the story we share. Some nights, I replay it all in my head, not out of longing, but out of wonder. How slowly, how carefully, how impossibly two lives can fold into each other without anyone noticing until it's already happened. If there's one thing I hope anyone listening takes away, it's this: the moments that seem small, the shared silence, the brush of a hand, the gentle acknowledgement of another soul. Sometimes they're everything. Sometimes they're the only thing that matters. And for anyone out there who's feeling the pull of someone they shouldn't, or waiting for someone to let them in, maybe notice the quiet spaces first. They might just lead you to something you didn't expect, something worth staying for. That wraps the story with a reflective, emotionally satisfying ending while leaving room for audience connection. I still think about that night, the one where everything quietly shifted without a single grand gesture. I remember the weight of her hand in mine, the soft brush of her shoulder against mine, and the way silence could carry so much meaning. Time has a funny way of stretching and compressing. Some days it feels like we've always existed in that space, that fragile bubble we somehow built together. Other days, I can still feel the memory of her hesitation, her careful walls, and it reminds me how rare it is to meet someone who allows you in, really in, without expecting you to fix anything. She's changed too, in ways small but profound. She smiles differently, lets herself linger in moments rather than pushing them away. I catch the way she pauses before shutting a door, as if reconsidering whether to protect herself or step closer to what feels alive. And I know I've grown too, more patient, more aware of the tiny, weightless moments that make connection possible. We never forced a label on what happened. There was no dramatic confession, no sudden, sweeping "this is us." We simply allowed our presence to settle together, letting the slow warmth of care and understanding fill the cracks we'd carried alone for years. I've learned that love isn't always loud. It doesn't always demand proof or declaration. Sometimes it's the gentle gravity that keeps you tethered to someone else's heartbeat without you even realizing it. It's the hand you take without thinking, the shared laughter over something small, the quiet certainty that, in this messy, unpredictable life, someone sees you and stays. And maybe that's the most extraordinary part, that it isn't perfect. It's messy, cautious, uncertain, and completely human. The way she looks at me now, the way I watch her, the way our silences fit together like mismatched puzzle pieces. It's enough. It's more than enough. Every so often, I catch her glancing my way, and I can see the memory of fear, loss, and hesitation lingering, but it's softened now. It's no longer a barrier. It's part of the story we share. Some nights, I replay it all in my head, not out of longing, but out of wonder. How slowly, how carefully, How impossibly two lives can fold into each other without anyone noticing until it's already happened. If there's one thing I hope anyone listening takes away, it's this. The moments that seem small, the shared silence, the brush of a hand, the gentle acknowledgement of another soul, sometimes they're everything. Sometimes they're the only thing that matters. And for anyone out there who's feeling the pull of someone they shouldn't, or waiting for someone to let them in, maybe notice the quiet spaces first. They might just lead you to something you didn't expect, something worth staying for.